This is IED 5.5a, CAD Model Features Part 1, problem number 2. In problem number 2, we are going to make an axle for our Automoblox T9. This axle is the part that holds the wheel onto the actual Automoblox. These three ridges here are the part that get placed or pushed into the Automoblox, and this part on the other side where the notch is the part where the wheel snaps in place. So let's go ahead and get started with Inventor. I've already started a new part. I need to start a new sketch, new 2D sketch on my XY plane. Again, this is our object that we're making, the axle. I'm going to show you the Project Lead the Way drawings that they gave us back in 5.2b. We have a series of horizontal dimensions. We're going to use every one of these dimensions. Then we have the diameters. Since this is a cylindrical object, we have these diameters here, but we're not going to use the full diameters because in order to do a revolve, which is what we will use to create this, we only need the top half of this drawing. So these diameters, we only need half of them. Now you'll see when this next drawing or image that I have here, I'll zoom in so that you can see it a little better. I cleared out some of the extra information on the drawing because it's a little confusing and hard to follow when you're not familiar with this. This is the object that we'll end up with when we draw it, and we will revolve that thing around the center line to create an axis, or around an axis line, or a line of symmetry, whichever way you want to call it, to create that Automoblox axle. So let's get started. I'm going to start right here at this corner right here, if you can see my mouse. I'm going to put it right on the origin. So I'm going to start with my line tool. I'm going to come over to the left. I am not worrying about any dimensions at this point. Over to the left, I notice it put in a horizontal constraint. That's okay. I went from the origin on the x-axis to the left. Didn't matter how far, created a horizontal constraint. That's okay. I like that. I want that to be horizontal. Now I'm going to draw upwards, and I'm going to get a perpendicular constraint off of that. You can see that there. I'm okay with that. I need it to be that way. It's no problem. I'm going to come to the left. I'm going to come out here a little ways. I'm going to get another perpendicular constraint that's being auto-placed for me. So that's good. Doesn't matter how long. I'm going to come up. Again, I want to get that perpendicular constraint on this one when I bring this up. That's good. So right now we're locking things in and right angles. I'm going to come across to the right, click there. And what you can't tell, I'm going over here off the screen to my goldish colored drawing. This comes across and drops down, and that's the area where it helps seat the axle in place. This will snap on the outside, and the axle the wheel will fit inside of this area. So that holds the wheel in place right here. So that's what we're doing with that. So we're going to come down a little bit on my drawing. Doesn't have to be much. And then this is at an angle, a diagonal. That diagonal comes up here to the right. Notice I want to get away from where it connects or snaps to these two endpoints. I'm going to control this. So I'm going to move it up here a little further and further out. I'll come back and clean that up with dimensions in a little bit. I'm going to come across. I need to go past this point. If you notice, it's a little further past. So I'm going to go past my y-axis. Again, I'm going to get a horizontal constraint. That's fine. Actually, it's saying that it's parallel. That's no problem. I can live with that. Going to take a perpendicular constraint here. It went up. Going to come back, draw a line again. It's probably going to say, it said perpendicular. Coming up, coming around to the back side here, coming left, going past my x-axis and past that line I created on the right side of the y-axis. And then come down. Again, it doesn't matter. I'm trying to get down here where I'm not connected to anything. It looks like I'm not snapping to anything over here on the left side, so that's good. Going to come across. Here's the tough part. You can't tell it, but there are 3 ridges here. You can barely see them. Those 3 ridges we're going to make as triangular shapes. So I'm going to make these. These I don't care if they match up with anything. I'm not really worried about it. I'm just putting them in place. I'll clean them up in a little bit. Then it comes over here to the right the rest of the way on a perpendicular line or parallel line here horizontally to the others. I'm going to come down a little bit at a 90-degree angle, come back to the left, come down, come over this way. Now, don't want to get to where it snaps. I'm going to stay shy of that, but I want to be on my, well, notice that I went below my y-axis. That's okay, or my x-axis. It's all right. I'm going to fix it in a second. Come over here, down to my, over to my y-axis and back up to the origin. Press escape a couple times to see what I have. Pretty close. I see I've got one thing I got to fix. I need to move this line up. So I will click my horizontal constraint here. I'll click on that end point and tell it to match the origin, and that will bump that line up. That's an easy fix. If you missed that x-axis line, no problem. We can move those things back. Everything, I'm going to press escape here 2-3 times to get out of any command that I'm in. Everything looks pretty good. Looks lined up. Looks like my shape. I could revolve that. It would kind of look like something similar to my axle. Not exactly what I want, but I can work with it. So let's start putting in some dimensions. This is going to get messy. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's going to get messy. I'm going to try to do this the cleanest way possible, but we're going to get a lot of dimensions up here, and then when we start putting in these dimensions across the vertical dimensions, it gets a little ugly with a lot of dimensions on the screen. So let's do the overall width of this object. So I'm going to start on the far left side, click the end point here. Oops, sorry, need to be in my dimension command. Click the far left point and come over to the far right point, bring my dimension control or line up, and I'm just going to put it here in the middle, and it's 1.302 right now, but I need it to be 0.86. So I'm going to change that to 0.86, and everything's shrunk down a little bit. I want this dimension line to be further away, so I'm going to press escape a couple times, and so I can click and drag it up here higher, get it up here where it's out of the way, because I'm going to start adding a bunch of small short dimensions, and we're going to start everything on this left edge and work our way across. The only thing we're not going to dimension from the left edge are the 3 nubs here. We're going to do those differently because they don't show up with any dimensions in the directions that, or the dimensions that came from Project Lead the Way. But I know what they are. I got some information from a teacher's file that they gave us that will give us those dimensions to create those. Okay, so let's start here on the left. First dimension we come to is 0.05. 0.05 is this part right here, which on my drawing is this line right here. So I'll go back to my dimension tool, again starting at the right edge, going to, or let's see, left edge, and going to the right edge of that line, come out here, and it is 0.05. So things are going to move across the screen here, across this drawing, as I start to add them. So they'll move left and right depending upon the dimensions that I put in. Next line I come to, as I go up here, is this 0.25. This 0.25 is the dimension point for this angle line that comes up, as well as the line down below. So taking my dimension, I'm going to do the bottom one first. Click on the end point here and the end point here. I'm just going to bring that down, and that is going to be 0.25. Things just jumped on my screen again. That's not a problem. Now I'm going to do the angle. I'll click on the end point here on the left edge and the end point of that angle, and I'll bring that up, and that is going to be 0.25. But instead of typing in 0.25, I'm just going to tell it, hey, be equal to that line that's on the bottom, because they're both the same, and it put in a formula that says whatever this dimension is here, you're going to be the same thing. So if I for some reason needed to make this dimension longer or shorter, it will adjust my angle to match that. So those are now lined up vertically here with each other. Next line or dimension as I come across over here is 0.28. 0.28 references the end of this part here. So again, I will start on the left point, go to the left point of this part here, and I will put in 0.28 for that dimension. Coming across, my next dimension I come to is this line down at the bottom. But I'm not going to put him in yet because I'm a little nervous about this. This is getting really close. I'm not sure what's going to happen. So I want to sneak this outside corner line in first, and then I will come back and deal with this stuff down here in a minute. So 0.48 is the far edge of this line. So let's go ahead and get that in just so that line gets a little cleaner for me. It's 0.48. That moved him over a little bit. Makes me feel a little bit better. And now I want to adjust. I'm going to come back now and catch this line down here. They say it is 0.44 for that edge line. So from the left edge to that point there, I'll come down and it's 0.44. Okay, things jumped on me there a little bit. That's okay. I see I've got another line right here. As I look at this, the opening that comes in here is 0.45 right here, comes down to that point. So I'll start on my left edge, come over to the right edge of that one, and I'll put that one in at 0.45. All right, looking closer, looking a little more like what we've got over here. And the last one we need to put in is the one for this point right here. So from my right edge again, come over here and put that one up, and it is 0.81. All right. My horizontal dimensions are all in place now, with the exception of one. Notice all my vertical lines are all blue, which means they've been given a dimension to hold them in those places, except this one. He's not blue. So we need to fix him. He's lined up with this line here, is where he should be, according to the drawing. So I'm just going to use my vertical constraint and say this corner or point needs to match that point there. And by doing that, those two will remain at the same spot. No matter where if I change this dimension, they'll both move together. So now all my vertical lines, which are the horizontal dimensions, are blue. So they're locked in. They're constrained at this point. Now we need to work on our diameters. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start on those, I'm going to move this dimension up here so it's out of my way a little bit. I want to create my line of symmetry. So I'm going to draw a line that goes across, horizontally across here, and press escape a couple times once you've drawn the line, and we're going to select the line and turn it into a hidden line. And that command is up here by the green check for finish sketch, which is up by that area. And I do that, the line now becomes a dotted construction line because I'm going to revolve this axle, this image around this line. But that line needs to be right here on the bottom of this part. So I need my horizontal constraint. Oops, I'm going to press escape a couple times and go back to my horizontal constraint. I want to click on the end point of my construction line and tell it to remain horizontal to the end point of the bottom of my drawing. And so that moved that line up there where he's supposed to be. I'm going to press escape a few times, and now comes the fun, if you will. We're going to start constraining these vertical dimensions for all these horizontal lines. All of our vertical lines are done, but our horizontal lines are not. So let's go ahead and get started on them. So I'll get my dimension tool. Everything I'm going to do now is coming off of this axis of symmetry, this construction line. So the first one I've got is how far away is this line from the origin. So I'm going to use my construction line as my point of reference. I'll click on its, on its end point, and the end point of my x-axis line here, and I'll come out and I'm going to tell it that that is 0.19, but I only need half of it, so divided by 2. And that moves that line up. Move that line up a little bit further so it's out of the way. And now we're locking things in. I've got some more lines turning blue. That's good. Continuing with my dimensioning, again from the endpoint of my construction line to the next line, which is right here. So that's this line here. Bring it out. That dimension is going to be 0.25, and I only need half of it, so it's divided by 2. I'm going to scoot this over a little bit so we have more space to work with. Our next dimension is to this line here, so I'm going to come up 0.2, or this one is 0.3 divided by 2. Whoops, got to click first. Now it's 0.3 divided by 2. So we're pulling things together, getting them where they need to be. As I come across this corner right here, it has no dimensions, so I'll again get my construction line for the axis of symmetry. I'll come down and click down here. Actually, sorry, don't even need to do that. I'm going to use my horizontal constraint and click on that endpoint right there and tell it to be equal to that endpoint right there. So that brought that down where it needs to be. And since we had told all of these to be at the same horizontal construction, or no, they're not. We're also, while we're here, let's go ahead and get these. We're going to make this one horizontal to that also, and that has now brought these all into position. So we're looking pretty good with that. We have 11 dimensions still needed to fully constrain this object, as you see down here. So I'm going to now get my dimension tool, again go to my end point of my construction line, and I'm going to come up here to this point right here. As I come across, that one is 0.46, so 0.46 divided by 2, getting close. We need this top line here, so I'll get the end point of it, bring it down to the construction line's end point, and then come out here, and it is 0.57 divided by 2. Whoops, missed that for some reason. I think I hit numlock instead. Divided by 2. There we go, that's what I did. And we're getting pretty blue here. Looks like we've got this line here is not right, but it's, again, I'm going to horizontally constrain that point to match this one because those go together. That took care of him. Not sure why we're, oh, I know why we're not green here. We haven't told it the size of this yet. And the instructions from Project Lead the Way tell us that, I'm going to zoom in here, that the distance from here to here is 0.2. All right, right now my computer says that it's 0.0146667, but Project Lead the Way's dimensions they gave us was 0.02. So I'm going to go ahead and hit 0.02. I don't like this dimension, but that's okay. It gets pretty tight right there, but that's all right. We'll live with that. They make the rules. Now that line's locked in blue. And the last thing that I have are these 3 triangular shapes here. And I'll tell you right now, to put those in place, we need to know how we're going to start on our right edge, and at that end point to this point, the right point of the first one is going to be 0.1. And then each one of these from here to the next point is 0.6. So 0.6. Oops, sorry. My mistake, 0.06. We're going to correct that. That's double click 0.06, not 0.6. And continue dimensioning this one to the next point. I'm just going to tell it to equal that 0.06 right there. So I'm going to click on the dimension and it'll make it the same. And I'm going to do it one more time with this one. Now again, I'm going to click on my first 0.06 dimension and put it in place. You can do that either way, but at least now I know it's forcing whatever I make these dimensions this way, they're going to be the same going across that way. And the last thing I need to dimension is how high these things are. And these triangles are pretty short. They're not very big because we don't need them to be. They are 0.01, so they're pretty tiny. And we must have had a horizontal constraint already attached to those because it dropped them all down to the same size. And we are now done. As I said, there's going to be a lot of dimensions on this drawing to create it. But it's finished, so I'll click Finish Sketch. And at this point, I'm ready to revolve it. So in order to revolve it, I'm going to click on the Revolve tool. And the Revolve tool automatically, because we just finished that sketch, is saying, hey, this is the object I think you want me to revolve. And we're going to say, yes, that's correct. And it's wanting to know right now, what axis do you want me to revolve around? And I'm going to click on my construction line axis of symmetry, and it said it's a full rotation. I could have made it a quarter or an angular rotation and said, hey, I only want you to do 45 degrees, and notice it only does part of that. Or I want you to go in the opposite direction, so it only would give part of that rotation, 90 degrees if I wanted that, a little bit further, or 180 if I wanted to do that. You can see as it's showing you that it's revolving that around this center point, continues on around. And you can see we've got the hole here, the hole on this side as it goes around. I can go to 270 as I work 3/4 of the way around, and you're starting to see that object come together. But we're going to go the full rotation all the way around to see that object. I'm going to click OK on that, and I'll click my home view, and I've got my axle. Looks pretty good, except we still do not have in these items right here, the two little notches on the far end. So I'm going to go back to this drawing. Now this is what I got from Project Lead the Way. That's how I knew a little bit about some of those dimensions that you didn't know about. I'm going to go back to the left, and it tells me on my original plans that this notch opening is 0.04 wide, and it goes in for a depth of 0.2. So I'm going to rotate my object around, and I'm going to right click on the surface. See, I have both both circles are white, so I'm getting the face of this. Right click on it and start a new sketch. I'm going to use the rectangle tool that is 2-point center, so I can start in the center of my drawing, come up to the right or down to the left, either way, it doesn't matter which way you go. I'm going to tell it I want it to be 0.04 wide. I'll hit my tab key, and at this point it's fine. Might get a little tighter there, but I'll hit enter. It puts it in. It's 0.04. It's the right size. I'll finish that sketch, and I'm going to do a cut extrude. Extrude tool, cut. It's going back in. It's going in an inch. I don't need it to go in an inch. I only need it to go in 0.2 inches, so a little less than 1/4 of an inch. And now if I hit my home view, you'll see it's cut that out, notched that out nicely for me. So I'm in good shape. Looks just like this guy over here. We can free rotate him around if we want to see, pivot him. See, now we can't see through because there is a solid there we had in the middle. But I can free rotate all the way around and see all the different angles of that to know that I've got it all done. So we're going to save this object as Axle with your initials. And that is the end of 5.5a problem number 2, the Automoblox T9 axle.